Pacific Core website. It usually takes a few days to get it all downloaded and then re-uploaded, but that will be available to you all in due time. We also want to make sure that you're aware that there are both Spanish and ASL, or American Sign Language interpretation services, that are available for this meeting. If you're interested in using one of those services, feel free to navigate to the interpretation, which is usually found at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And then you can select either ASL under Watch or Spanish under Audio. If it is missing, sometimes you have to hit the little ellipses, the ... or the more icon to really have that interpretation option show up. We do encourage everybody while engaging in group discussion to be on camera if they're in an environment where they are safe and able and comfortable to do so. We try to make these interactions as human as possible in this virtual world that we're all living in. For any technical support, you can go ahead and direct message tag/eSource as the recipient, and he'll be able to help troubleshoot any of those issues with you and really make sure that you're able to sign into the meeting and experience it in the best way possible. Lastly, want to let everyone know that the purpose of this meeting is engagement. So engagement is encouraged. You can drop your comments or questions in the meeting chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout the meeting, but you're also welcome to raise your hand, and we'll be monitoring that as well, the participant list, to see who's coming off mute and on video. We do ask that you stay muted until you're speaking, just so we don't get any of the background noise, and we really give the presenters their time in the virtual spotlight. As usual, I am part of the eSource facilitation team. You can see some of my colleagues on the screen. Jeffrey is actually enjoying some time in Europe alongside Kimberly, I guess concurrently to Kimberly, I should say. So happy that he's able to get some time off and away, but you do have me, Morgan Westbury, as well as Zanaya Morgan on the line, and we're here as a resource, so please use us as such. You can message us directly, both during this meeting and after, and we'll be able to help connect the comments that you give either to the subject matter experts or to the broader engagement and regulatory teams. Next slide. So getting started with today, you'll see on the screen some of the objectives and the agenda that we have laid out today. Our main objectives are going to be update-based. So you're going to hear a plethora of updates, from regulatory to the Clean Energy Implementation Plan, otherwise known as the CEIP, as well as engagement updates and DSP, or distribution system planning updates. We're then going to shift after the break to learn about the different demand response activities that are going on in Washington right now, as well as provide some updates around the IRP, or the Integrated Resource Planning, or Integrated Resource Plan rather, in Washington. So you can see the acronyms on the screen here. We sometimes live in a world of alphabet soup, so wanted to make sure that we did provide those to you all. But if in the presentation itself there's anything that you do have a question on, feel free to drop it in the chat or let us know. We'll do our best to spell those out as we move through the presentation. Next slide. As you all know, it takes a village, and it takes a whole lot of people to make this possible, both on the screen and not on the screen. So we have most of the presenters on the screen. There are a few extra in the demand response that I'm really excited to be able to hear from, including Ryan Harvey, Sierra Gentry, and Chris Knopf. But then also everyone on the screen and everyone working with them to get all the information in a position to be presented to you all today. Next slide. So here I'm going to hand it back over to Rohini to jump us into the content and start us off with some regulatory updates.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, we can just have a few quick updates. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. We will probably take them back to get responses because I am by no means the expert on our regulatory updates, but just a few recent rate proceedings that have concluded. So the first is the LIBA, or the Low Income Bill Assistance. So this surcharge was increased 1%, which was effective August 1st of this year. We also have a change to the system's benefits charge, which does fund conservation efforts. And if there are more questions, we have Nancy on the line, I believe. And so this was increased about 1.1% across the average customer's bill, and this was effective September 1st, 2024. I do believe that that 1.1% represents an average and not necessarily the actual increase in that charge. Additionally, the 2023 Power Cost Adjustment Mechanism, or PCAM, was suspended for adjudication. I don't have any other information, so I believe the procedural schedule is forthcoming. And as a side note, if you were following the 2022 Power Cost Adjustment Mechanism, or PCAM, I believe the order from the Commission is forthcoming by the end of this week, and that will then go into effect November 1st, 2024 for the impact on rates. So a couple different rate impacts and proceedings that have concluded recently. Additionally, there's added recovery for approved demand response programs, which is in docket UE 240393. Hopefully there are no questions, but if there are, I will redirect them. Okay, here, oh, there we go. Charlie.
Yeah, good morning, Rohini.
Good morning.
Thanks for these updates. Quick question, hopefully it's one that you can answer. It's just a clarification for me. The system benefits charge, you said it funds conservation. Is that in Washington, or is this referring to like the public purpose charge in Oregon? Or yeah, just curious for a little bit more information or background
I
on
will
that.
let others on the line speak to this. I would assume this is Washington specific, though.
Yeah, that's the Washington System Benefits Charge at Schedule 191.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy, and thanks, Rohini.
Sure.
Thank you, Nancy. Are there any other questions about this?
I'm not seeing anyone else come off mute or raise their hand, but if anything does come up, you will be the first to know, Rohini, and by proxy, Nancy.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. We can move forward then. So we have a couple mostly high-level updates on the Clean Energy Implementation Plan. So this is referring to, we have our inaugural CEIP that was filed in 2021, which is a plan for 4 years. So we are still in that first inaugural planning cycle, which runs 2022 through 2025, as a reminder. As part of our requirements in our CEIP, which runs on a 4-year cycle, we do provide a biennial update, which is essentially halfway through, 2 years in. So we filed that November 1st, 2023. I'm sure everyone's very well aware of the things that were updated in the biennial CEIP. It was based off of modeling done in the 2023 Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP, that was filed in the spring of 2023. And I think the main issue that came out of this was that the company did revise our clean energy interim targets downwards, just to be more representative of the realistic situations that we were facing, and also incorporated some modeling assumption changes to things like the allocation assumptions, just several changes representing ongoing developments in reality. So as part of the biennial clean energy implementation plan, it was set for adjudication earlier this year. And we've just got kind of the whole timeline up here, but we've run through this fairly often, so I won't rehash all of the dates. Most recently, we had a public comment period on October 10th. I don't believe that members of the public actually came. We do send this out in we have customer notices that go out. It's on the website, there are emails. It is publicized, but if anyone has feedback on how to better publicize, please let us know, or let staff know. But because there wasn't really a lot of participation in the hearing, in the meeting on the 10th, there was an extension for written comments, and I believe we got those back yesterday. And I think that there are 2 public comments, and so those should be made available in the docket. If anyone can't find them or is looking for a link, let us know and we can get that to you. And then after that, even more recently, last Monday, we had an evidentiary hearing held at the Washington Utilities and Transportations Commission. Staff and other intervener parties had an opportunity to cross Pacific Corp's witnesses and vice versa. It was a full day hearing. It was a long day, but we had, I think, really productive discussion, and also allowed an opportunity for commissioners to ask clarifying questions as well. So now, since the hearing has wrapped up, we have 2 more milestones, which are noted at the bottom. November 12th and November 27th, we essentially have 2 rounds of post-hearing briefs. So the first is kind of our initial briefs, and then the second round are reply briefs. And after that, we would expect some commission order with a decision. We don't have, I think, an expected time frame for that. There was not a deadline set for that order in the original procedural schedule. I know that the commission is pretty busy with quite a lot of cases going on. So I think we hope to receive an order by the end of the year, but I don't think that's guaranteed. So hopefully in 2025, when we come back to this space, though, we'll have resolution, and it'll likely have impacts for our 2025 clean energy implementation plan. So we'll be ready to pivot, I think, based on information that comes in, and we will keep everyone up to date as we move forward with that. Next slide, please. So just a quick recap of where we are in our vulnerable populations workshops. And as just kind of a reminder, as part of our conditions in our 2021 revised CEIP, as a condition of acceptance, we did agree to further workshop our definition and our measuring of vulnerable populations, expanding from the way that we had originally incorporated it in our first CEIP. As part of this, we have held a couple of workshops and still intend to hold one more, which would be number 3. So in the last vulnerable populations workshop, we proposed using geographic vulnerable population rather than single characteristic approach, and we reviewed that initial geographic vulnerable population analysis. And we did obtain some great input from participants on the methodology and populations to be included in that vulnerability analysis. So next steps include taking all that feedback and incorporating it into the geographic vulnerable population approach. And we anticipate holding a 3rd workshop at the beginning of the new year, sometime in January, and we will share those details as soon as they become available. And we set a time for that, but please look forward to that. And we hope to have everyone's continued participation in that space. I think we've made some really cool strides in this geographic approach, so I hope everyone can stay keyed into that. Okay. Seeing no comments or questions, I'll move to the next slide. So We talked a little bit about this in the last meeting. This is a recap of some engagement specific conditions that also came out of the acknowledgement of our 2021 revised CEIP. So the first condition on here it was number 42. It was a miscellaneous condition. And it basically says that Pacific Corp will fully engage all of its advisory groups in developing future CEIPs and CEIP updates. Pacific Corp will offer at least one joint consultation session, which will include all of the advisory group members. To provide feedback on the CEIP updates, and the consultation process itself. And Pacific Corp will also describe how that feedback is incorporated from advisory groups and the public in its CEIP, future CEIPs, and CEIP updates. Additionally, we have another condition, which was 26, which was a specific stakeholder engagement condition, which is after consultation with its advisory groups, Pacific Corp will file a draft CEIP on a timeline deemed sufficient by the company and parties to incorporate comments. So I do believe that to the first condition, this is something that we do, but we just need to get better and I think more coordinated and more strategic in how we better utilize everyone's time. I think our biggest concern is we don't want to overload all of our advisory group members who already dedicate quite a fair bit of time to understanding this process and to giving feedback in a way that's usable. So I think offering joint consultation sessions could be a great use of everyone's time if we can get that out ahead of everyone and make a plan that really works for everyone. So more coming for that. In the next couple of weeks, we will be internally solidifying our plan for our 2025 CEIP engagement. And so we really hope to get a schedule, at least a loose timeline to all of our participants at the top of the year so that people have kind of a guide for when and where we will cover certain types of topics and then and then we can kind of use that as a guide to think about when do joint consultation sessions make the most sense, what do advisory groups need or other participants in this space need ahead of those different deadlines to be able to provide adequate feedback. And so really hoping to improve upon this process that we've been building for the last couple of years. And as far as the draft timeline, so in this last green blurb at the bottom, our current proposal is that we draft a 2025 clean energy implementation plan, and we send out this draft to advisory groups and interested parties 45 days prior to filing date. So per law, the 2025 CEIP is due October 1, 2025. This is maybe 6 months after the 2025 IRP should be filed on March 31st. So this does give us, quite a bit of time between the IRP to the CEIP to really work on and incorporate all of those other elements that are, beyond just the long-term resource planning piece. And I think a draft 45 days ahead of time, we feel is just the right amount of time to give folks enough time to provide adequate feedback after they've read the document, but also gives us adequate time to hopefully take the comments and either address them or at least acknowledge why we maybe can't change something. In the past cycles, we have done a 30-day comment period or a draft 30 days ahead of time. And that does feel very tight, but potentially expanding it beyond 30 days might cut into the time that we have to actually get meaningful content into the draft. And so we felt 45 days was a good point, but we really do welcome feedback on this. And just for everyone's awareness, this information and this draft filing date proposal is and has been and will continue to be circulated with all of our advisory groups. And so we are soliciting that input and feedback in each space, and we'll take that into consideration. So, folks don't need to comment right now if they're not comfortable. Send us a chat, send us an email, whatever feels comfortable for you. If you oppose the 45 days and have a different recommendation, please let us know. And we hope to, at the beginning of 2025, have that draft timeline solidified so that we can make that commitment to everyone and so you can know when that draft is coming out. And of course, As far as reviewing submitted comments and feedback, I'll talk a little bit more about our updated feedback tracker and what that looks like. But what we have done in the past CEIPs and will continue to do in the next is typically attach an appendix that is a matrix of all of the comments and feedback we've received. We are hoping to better use our online feedback tracker to kind of keep that public feedback accountable for everyone throughout the process. But we do also include that in our CEIP. And of course, we try to reflect that in the actual work, but we always want to make sure that we're keeping, very transparent record of the feedback that we've received. And if it's not being incorporated, at least explaining why. So I think we have a good plan to accomplish these things. But again, really open to feedback. Now is a great time for it because we are getting ready to think about how we will tackle 2025, both the planning cycle itself and the engagement side of that. So hopefully this gives everyone some food for thought. And I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And, folks, feel free to interrupt me. So on our feedback tracker, people might remember that we have a feedback tracker. It is updated as of this last week. Yay. Thank you very much to our eSource facilitators, by the way, for helping us meet this somewhat monumental goal. But our feedback tracker is live and updated on our website. It's current through 2024 August. So it doesn't incorporate feedback received past August because we had quite a lot of feedback to get through. But the great thing about the feedback tracker is it is a way for us to consolidate feedback that we receive in different meeting spaces. So in the CEIP engagement space, as well as our equity advisory group space. I know that there has all been, longstanding questions or comments around incorporating even more additional advisory groups feedback. At this time, we are not doing that just based on time, space, and bandwidth to account for these things. But I think at this point, we are capturing a really core set of feedback from our participants in our CEIP process. And this is really great because folks can go through and see what type of feedback we've received, if we have kind of a direct response, if we can provide clarification, we do. If we, simply need to receive that and consider it for future planning, we do. And it's just a really great way for, I think, us to be held accountable and for folks to make sure that their feedback, is adequately received and recorded. And we do typically take basically this entire feedback tracker and include it as an appendix to our CEIP. And it really helps us, I think, just have all of that feedback in front of us. Something that we want to try and commit to next year is to stick to more of a quarterly schedule so that we are updating that feedback tracker about 3 or 4 times a year, kind of on a quarterly cycle. And this will help us keep consistent with getting all of that feedback in and give folks who participate kind of an expectation around timelines for when they can look at that. More to come on timelines, I think, at the beginning of next year. But at the very least, we've got our current feedback tracker updated, which is awesome. It is formatted in Excel. So, for folks who are really comfortable in Excel, you can filter on the different categories and kind of sort through feedback if that's something you'd like to do. If you find anything concerning in there, please let us know. But really, really huge shout out to our eSource team because they really got us over the finish line here. So hopefully in future it'll be a little bit less painful, but it is a great opportunity to get our SMEs to review feedback that they may not have been present for, and just a great opportunity for other participants to see if the type of feedback that they have is also being iterated already by other parties. Okay, so that's kind of all high-level engagement updates. Again, folks, please feel free to leave us feedback in the chat, email us, whatever you're comfortable with. But we really hope to receive some feedback in the next couple of weeks. If there is any, let us know what has not worked, what has worked, ideas you have, or things you'd like to see in the future. We are kind of cooking up some ideas to try maybe some new methods, but yeah, overall, we're just here to continue to learn from each other. Okay, so I will pass it back to Morgan, who will cover some additional engagement updates. Thanks.
Yes, I'm not seeing anyone come off mute or raise their hand, but we will continue to monitor for that. And I will also take that compliment and raise a compliment and say that it really is a team effort. We're happy to help being a part of the facilitation team, but every presenter from the Pacific Core side of things that has come to any engagement space in the last year or so, they're the ones that are doing the real hard work. So really appreciate everyone. And yeah, like I said, it takes a whole team, both the people that you see here today, but also everyone working with them. But moving to engagement updates, I'm going to go ahead and speak on behalf of Kimberly Alejandro, since she is off in Europe having hopefully the best time ever. Can't wait to see all of the pictures she brings back from that. But want to talk about the future of this space. The goal for Pacific Core is to continue these engagement series, the CEIP engagement series in 2025. And I guess the main thing we really want to impress upon you all today is that now is the time for feedback. I think in November and December, there will be a lot of work done on the internal side of things for Pacific Core, and to really outline what the needs are for 2025 and how to achieve those needs and the engagement around all of the activities that are going on in the state. So if you are interested in continuing your participation in this space, definitely encourage that and welcome everybody to do so. We will also drop this email into the chat here, just so everybody has it. If you are interested in signing up to the distribution list to make sure that you are getting all of the emails around this, please reach out to this email and let the team know so that you can be on the first kind of go round of that. But then again, also, if you have ideas of how you would like to see engagement in 2025, now is the time to kind of hear that, right? It, as you all know, takes a lot to pull these together and to really make sure that all the information is not only shared, but shared in a way that is easily understood and transparent, and feedback is always welcome. And would love to hear how you would like to see these unroll in the next year. So reach out either to this email directly. Again, I offer the facilitation team as a resource as well if you want to reach out directly to us, if that feels better to do it that way. But it really takes your feedback to make sure that we are kind of hitting on what you want to hear about and in the structures that are the most conducive to you. So a lot of words, basically. We're excited to continue this, and really looking forward to sharing some of the upcoming info, but also from hearing how we can do a better job getting this information to you. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, Charlie, I see your hand up.
Thank you again. I guess just a very quick piece of feedback right now while we're on this slide and kind of posing that question of like, how do we want the 2025 engagement series to look like, or what do we want it to look like? I think it is often easier for folks in advisory groups and stakeholders in engagement series like these, particularly related to CEIPs, to provide engagements, obviously when they have something to look at first and not just like left to read something outside of the group and then come back and have that ready on hand to kind of like go through their list of items. It's easier to collaborate like on the spot and when you can see and discuss with people live. But I think one something from the last round of CEIPs that was helpful that some of the IOUs did was not necessarily discussing CEIP content by kind of like technical subgroups. Like, so here's stuff about demand side management or here's stuff about DSP, but having discussions specifically related to the sections of the CEIP. So having a section of the 2025 engagement series workshop be like, we're going to talk about the specific actions. And then next we're going to talk about the CBIs. And then, okay, now we're going to talk about the targets. That way it kind of pieces together stakeholders' thoughts on this EIP itself, and it kind of tees you up for being able to comment and respond to the draft that comes out as well, because I think it's a little bit challenging to kind of piece together as folks who might not be as technical or engaged in DSP and DSM and modeling as the utility to put that into how it overlaps with the subsections of the CEIP. So hopefully that made sense. I can clarify or follow up too if needed.
No, absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So, because you hit on absolutely right. Sometimes it won't be the full draft itself with the full narrative. But what I'm hearing is talking about it in the structure of the report itself, or the plan rather itself, rather than maybe piecemealing by subcategories or interest areas. So perhaps having the first engagement series on certain sections of the report, hearing the feedback, even though the draft itself might not be at that shareable point.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good summary.
That's
yeah,
great.
I sorry. I think it can just be, I guess, yeah, kind of confusing sometimes if it's left to folks in advisory groups to be able to like put all the technical pieces together and line that up with how it's supposed to be formatted and communicated in the final CEIP. So but that's just my thought. If others have different opinions or different thoughts on how they'd like to go through reviewing and providing feedback on the 2025 CEIP, definitely curious to hear.
Give folks a moment to chime in, but again, just reiterate that that's great feedback, and gives us a lot to go on, right? To go into maybe perhaps the frameworks, so that then things aren't, not necessarily that they would be a surprise, but that then there's that base level of awareness prior to seeing the draft itself. I think that's great feedback. Not seeing anybody else, but again, feel free to reach out via chat or reach out directly on this, because it's you all and your feedback that really gets us there, right? It's how we are able to come to this space with value, and we want to make sure that we're providing the value, since you all are so generous with your time and feedback. So I really appreciate that. But not seeing anybody else, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Christina Medina, who is the manager of stakeholder engagement for PacifiCorp, to talk about the EAG.
Thank you, Morgan. So a couple of things. Christina Medina, Stakeholder Policy and Engagement Manager for PacifiCorp. I spent most of my time really focusing on bringing the state of Oregon advisory groups to fruition over the last year or so, in parallel to the efforts led by Kimberly Alejandro in the state of Washington. So now that she's moved into a larger role here at the organization, I'm kind of stepping in to fill in those gaps and make sure that we don't have any kind of lost time with respect to continuing to connect with our our very beloved Equity Advisory Group. So just wanted to share a little bit of what's happening in this quarter of 2024. Bit of a retrospective. On October 10th, we had a combined session with the Low Income Advisory Group and the Equity Advisory Group. That meeting was pretty robust. We had a significant discussion around definite opportunities for improvement around connecting with communities that are in need and making sure that we tether those needs to programs. So that was quite a great use of time. We also had an opportunity to talk about multifamily electric vehicle supply equipment, so the EVSE program, and that was a great opportunity for us to receive input and lens on how that program might be adapted to be more usable, and also gain some perspective on really what is the community profile and is the program usable for the communities that we're trying to serve. And then finally, we had some communications updates with regard to our language access plan, which was quite a wonderful experience for us at PAC here to be able to develop a draft plan and then seek external input on the plan as we proceed forward in trying to finalize that draft. In November, we're taking a break. We're having some reprieve in all of our engagement spaces just to give folks some time. We also have some filings that we need to go through in Oregon and other places. And then in December, we'll kick up again to do some end of year reflection. We'll also start focusing on 2025 planning. And again, we have another combined session with DSM or distribution system management. For some reason, I'm conflating my acronyms, which is an unusual thing for me. But anyhow, Nancy will be sharing with us how we'll be expecting to see that combined session work out in December. So a lot of words again. Thank you for having me in this space. Sorry about that tongue tie there. Hope you have a great day.
We're all living this alphabet soup world, Christina. Thank you so much. Charity, can I hand the virtual baton over to you to speak about some of the other ongoing items?
Yes. Thank you, Morgan, and good morning, everyone. This is an update, the Charity Spires customer solutions, and I manage low-income programs, including LIBA and weatherization. And I'm providing an update on the discussions we've had around docket UE 230-172 settlement stipulations. This is around the LIBA program, the arrearage management program, community-based organization pilot program, and also changing billing logic. And we initially had discussions on these stipulations with the Low-Income Advisory Group in June of this year. And then in July, we had a joint discussion with the Low-Income Advisory Group and Equity Advisory Group. And from those discussions, we had set up weekly sessions in August and September to further those discussions. And maybe the next slide, please, Morgan. So yeah, this kind of provides the high-level schedule, for those discussions, so both in August and September. And what I would like to say, maybe a summary of, what came out of those discussions is that for the low-income bill assistance program, tier modification, and arrearage management program, those are, we want to make those changes based on data. It has to be data driven. And so out of those discussions, we've decided to work with Empower Data Works to do a refreshed energy burden assessment to help guide, the changes or modification that we would like to implement. And we had just finished the purchase order, I would say, or the contract with Empower Data Works. So we're going to start that data collection this month of November, and hope to have the final assessment by end of December. And we will then reconvene with Low-Income Advisory Group and the Equity Advisory Group, to present results from that assessment and, continue those discussions. And we would need to, based on those discussions, file a packet for changes in April of 2025, and with those changes applicable before October 1st of 2025. So that's what we're looking ahead for, waiting for that assessment to be completed. And then next slide, please. And then just this is a list of those that participated, which includes the agencies that we partner with for both LIBA and weatherization, with UTC staff, with the Energy Project, with Northwest NWEC, Northwest Energy Coalition, Yakima County Health District. So we had participation from members of both Low Income Advisory Group and also Equity Advisory Group participating in those conversations and sessions. So with that, any questions? If not, I will hand it back over to Morgan.
And I'm gonna play a little hot potato and pass it over to Nancy to wrap us up on some engagement related updates. Thank you so much, Charity and Christina.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Goddard. I'm our WattSmart Business Program Manager, and I've been leading our DSM advisory group. So this slide is a summary of our demand side management advisory group engagement for basically from August through the end of the year. And it shows the drafts, our meetings, and the drafts that we share for feedback, and also the CEIP engagement meetings. As far as the drafts that we provide, we've been providing them to both the DSM advisory group and the Equity Advisory Group at the same time. So both groups get the same information and the same, they're on the same schedule for providing any comments. And just in general, when it comes to energy efficiency programs, we're working to achieve the Energy Independence Act objectives and the Clean Energy Transformation Act objectives. And how we do this is incorporated into the programs that we offer for our customers, the energy efficiency programs. So when we do our planning, we're doing it for both the EIA and the Energy Independence Act and the Clean Energy Transformation Act at the same time. So recently we worked on our program changes for 2025. So we shared those drafts with the both advisory groups and received comments. And we're ready to post the program changes for 2025 on our website to give our customers 45-day notice on November 15th. So those changes will go into effect on January 1. And those changes also end up in our annual conservation plan, so our 2025 annual conservation plan. So, and we've also shared the draft of that with both advisory groups and received comments back also. So basically the process is, as far as the drafts, we share the drafts, we take in comments, and we finalize from there. And so this slide kind of just shows all of that was going on and is still going on this year. And that's all for energy efficiency. In addition, we have demand response. And so I have one of the demand response draft filings on this slide that's already gone out for comment. And you're going to be hearing about more draft filings that are coming soon that are not listed here, but you're going to hear about them later in this presentation from the demand response team. And then just lastly, we also shared the draft language access plan for comment. So that's all the work that's been going on recently with the DSM advisory group. And we do have the joint meeting on December 12th, joint DSM advisory group and Equity Advisory Group. And from the DSM advisory group perspective, a main thing that we'll be covering at that meeting is the draft 2025 WattSmart Communications Plan. And that's what I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nancy, and hope to see some folks in that upcoming December 12th meeting. I do want to draw attention to a comment in the chat, or rather a question in the chat from Charlie. PAC plans to file LIBA changes in April 2025. Is that correct, Charity? And I see you beat me to it. I see you just dropped something to the chat as well.
Correct. Yeah. So per the docket stipulation 10, we will be discuss and seek consensus through the Low Income Advisory Group and Equity Advisory Group. And then from that, whatever we decide is what we're going to package and file by April 30th. I don't think it has to be by that date. It could be sooner, but that is what's on the stipulation. And then the effective date would be before October 1st of 2025.
Thanks, Charity.
Thank you.
Awesome, and thank you for the questions. This is what we're here for. Want to give everyone a quick second and make sure there were no other questions on some of the engagement updates that we've heard so far. Not seeing or hearing any, but again, it's not your last bite at the apple, as I like to say. So if you do happen to think of something, just let us know. But without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Ian and Shauna. Are you guys there in virtual land to talk about some DSP or distribution system planning updates? Ian, I see you came off mute, but I'm not hearing you. It wouldn't be a virtual meeting without at least one tech issue, guys and girls. So,
Can you hear me?
there you are, Ian.
Hey.
Welcome to the virtual stage.
Sorry, yeah, I had to mess with my microphone settings.
Course.
Yeah, I'm here, so I'm ready to discuss this.
Perfect. Well, we're excited to have you.
Thank you. So hey everybody, I'm Ian Hugendam. I lead the distribution system planning team. So I'm going to walk you through a few key topics today. So I'm going to begin by revisiting what we've covered in our previous session. And then next I'll explain how DSP aligns and supports various initiatives across Washington. I'll then share how DSP is actively engaged today and outline our plans for both near-term and long-term advancements. We'll then look at the obstacles we face in advancing distribution system planning and how we plan to address those obstacles. And then lastly, I'll discuss how we collect, track, and implement feedback that we've received from these workshops to drive continuous improvement. So in our last session, we focused on some key differences between Oregon and Washington and how these differences will influence our studies, particularly in identifying cost-effective, non-traditional solutions for Washington. So one major distinction between Oregon and Washington is the metering infrastructure that we have in Washington. We highlighted the importance of granular load and voltage data provided by the AMI system or Advanced Metering Infrastructure System, and how we've been leveraging that data effectively in Oregon. We also covered some of the differences in implementation partners between the two states and how this will require a slightly different approach to collaborative efforts in Washington. And lastly, we discussed the steps that we've taken in Oregon to define community resilience to long duration power outages and how we plan to incorporate these resilience needs in our distribution system planning studies in Washington. So we see that DSP will have some strong ties to both the DSM and CEIP initiatives. DSP will be supporting various requirements for DSM, including the conservation by voltage reduction analysis assessments and ensuring alignment with load forecasting and load profile assumptions to determine the cost effectiveness of solutions and programs. DSP will also be considering the impact of ongoing projects and initiatives and considering how to leverage various programs for non-traditional alternative solutions to solve grid needs. So for the CEIP, DSP will be providing updates regarding solutions that we identify that increase integration of DER and other renewable energy resources. DSP will be hosting community workshops, which we'll talk about more later on in this session, and continue to foster collaboration with our community stakeholders in the areas that we study, including members of our equity advisory group and other leaders of the communities. So now let me share a high-level roadmap for how we envision advancing our DSP initiatives in Washington. So currently, DSP plays a central role in the conservation voltage reduction analysis, which is a key component of the annual conservation plan developed by the DSM team. In our near term, our primary focus is documenting our strategy for the 2025 CEIP filing. This will include initiating a 10-year distribution system planning studies beginning in 2026, which will evaluate non-traditional solutions, incorporating community workshops, and actively engaging with our advisory groups throughout that process. And then looking further ahead, we anticipate the integration of innovative technologies across the state. This includes greater use of behind-the-meter devices, controllable devices, and enhanced data from systems like AMI when that eventually gets implemented, as that is an invaluable input in developing new customer programs. So these advancements will further support Washington's sustainable energy goals and help us adapt to the emerging energy needs. So I'd just like to take a moment to revisit some of the technology barriers that we've discussed before that require us to adapt our approaches to studying Washington's system. Currently, our distribution system planning studies in Oregon rely heavily on loading data from the SCADA systems, which record time series loading at distribution substations and circuits. This data is essential for estimating load changes and making projections of load growth. However, we discussed in our last session, Washington does have limited SCADA coverage and historical time series data, which challenges our ability to analyze load growth across the entire distribution system in Washington. So in Oregon, we address similar gaps by developing processes that aggregate AMI data, and we use that as a substitute for circuit level measurements. So beyond filling the historical gaps, AMI has brought additional insights and benefits to our studies. However, in Washington, these data limitations will constrain our ability to perform in-depth studies across some service areas that we have until we expand SCADA coverage or implement AMI. Next slide. So now I'd like to address some of the administrative challenges that we have in DSP for our efforts in Washington. So first, the DSP team is currently a pretty small team. We have just 2 planning engineers responsible for conducting 10-year detailed studies across the Oregon service area. So to successfully expand into Washington, we estimate that we'll need to add at least 1 more planning engineer to our team. Another administrative challenge is justifying the additional costs. So expanding the efforts will not only require more staffing, but also increase expenses related to community engagement throughout the distribution studies. Additionally, non-traditional solutions that we may identify could create cost burdens for customers that choose to participate in those non-traditional solutions. Finally, implementing non-traditional solutions often takes longer than traditional approaches, primarily because we are exploring programs and technologies that we have limited prior experience in. So this process involves some uncertainty, and we may need to pivot back to traditional solutions if unexpected challenges arise. So in our first round of studies in Oregon, we did identify grid needs that were well suited for non-traditional solutions, but we are still evaluating if the non-traditional solutions are going to be cost effective. In the second round of studies that we did in Oregon, we did not reveal any grid needs suitable for non-traditional solution approaches. So in summary, grid needs that align with cost-effective non-traditional solutions we've found to be very rare. And in Washington, this process is going to be further complicated by limited access to granular time series data, which is crucial for accurate assessments. So I'd like to share our approach for collecting and incorporating community feedback. So throughout our engagement process, we do record any feedback that's shared through our engagement in meeting minutes, and then we transfer that into a database that the distribution system planning team manages, as well as the CEIP feedback tracker. We review each item and determine if it falls within the DSP scope or if it should be directed to another team within the company. Once feedback has been addressed, we document the actions or response from the DSP database and tracker, and periodically we review that feedback to identify trends and insights that could help guide our future initiatives. I saw a question come in regarding AMI. Could someone read that question for me?
We do have a question in the chat from Jacqueline Simmons asking, is the company looking into AMI for Washington?
So as far as I'm aware, there's currently no plans for implementing AMI in Washington, and the DSP team is not the group that would be leading that effort. However, the distribution system planning team will be advocating for AMI and providing the justification and some of the benefits when that does arise.
Jacqueline, did that answer your question? Would you feel free to come off mute and expand if you have any follow-up for Yen?
No, that answered my question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. And I guess while I have you, we did get another question from Katie Ware in the chat. Are there plans to implement grid enhancing technologies and to add to our acronym list, GETs?
That is a new acronym for me. I'm not actually aware of that acronym. That's the first time I've heard it. Is there an example of what some of those grid enhancing technologies would be?
Katie, wondering if you'd be able to come off mute and maybe expand on this so we can get you the best answer possible.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so there are lots of different kinds of technologies that fall under the GITS umbrella. It's basically an umbrella term that tries to capture the different ways to modernize the grid and allow for more communication such that the grid is more efficient, less energy is wasted, and is able to be serving customers. So there is another docket in Washington about what is that docket called? I can't think of the name of the docket. It's in attempt to,
Hey,
sorry,
Katie.
yeah.
Katie,
sorry
this is
about that.
Charlie. You sound just a little muffled. I don't know if your mic is covered.
Yeah, you were going in and out there in the last few seconds. So I think I heard something around a new docket.
Okay.
Oh, you are in the room now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Wow.
I don't know
Katie,
what
so great to have you.
I'm sorry to waste everyone's time. I don't know what you heard, but so there's a docket in Washington about performance-based rate making, and some things, including AMI data, is sort of a goal under that docket for utilities to be implementing, and grid enhancing technologies are also something that the commission is hoping utilities can implement sooner rather than later to try and capitalize on energy that could be serving customers, but currently, because of various limitations on the grid, isn't. And the GETS umbrella, Grid Enhancing Technologies, includes a lot of different things. So I won't go into the different kinds of technologies that fall under the umbrella. I think somebody at PAC is aware of this. I just wanted to know if this is something that this team is considering. And if not, I'm sure someone on the energy side of the modeling is thinking about this. And we can, I can hold my question for them at some point.
So I think I can basically say that, we do not limit the different types of solutions that we consider to address the grid needs that we identify. So the things that we're looking for are, areas of the distribution system that are being overloaded or we expect to become overloaded. And we look at ways that we can, influence or manage the load on the distribution system instead of increasing the capacity of the distribution system by putting in bigger wires or bigger transformers or things like that. So I don't think I would take anything off the table in terms of the types of solutions that we do consider, including adding new technologies to the system to be able to manage load.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ian. And then I also see a hand up from Paul. Would love to invite you to come off mute and chime in here.
Yes, hello. I wanted to kind of piggyback on my colleague Jacqueline's question from earlier. So I'm seeing that something like 50% of the circuits in the state of Washington have SCADA capabilities and no AMI data to rely on. And I'm wondering if, since you've said, sounded like you said that there's no plans to expand AMI into Washington, I wonder if you could kind of give us a shorthand as to what the differences are in Oregon compared to Washington and why they were able to implement AMI so effectively. And then kind of a second question, you mentioned non-traditional solutions. The only one that I saw specifically called out was energy efficiency. Are there other examples of non-traditional solutions that you could offer in addition to energy efficiency?
Yes, there are. So, okay, let's start with the AMI question. And I don't really, I'll have to maybe get back to you on the answer to this one, but I am not aware of the specifics as to what made Oregon be able to implement AMI versus, the maybe some of the challenges that we have in Washington for implementing that system. But in terms of some of the differences in terms of coverage, it's similar SCADA coverage in Oregon and Washington. As we began distribution system planning in Oregon, we initially had a plan to expand SCADA throughout our entire service area in Oregon, and we've found that, using the AMI data is a fairly good substitute. So some of the funding for that expansion of SCADA has really been taken over by the need for wildfire mitigation efforts. In terms of the other types of solutions for that we would be considering for non-traditional solutions, we look at, in addition to energy efficiency, we look at leveraging our energy programs for demand response. So smart thermostats is one of the things that we've been analyzing a lot. And if when the time comes that we do implement a managed charging solution, that would be another lever that we would have. And we have our commercial and industrial demand response programs as well. We look at what impact those could have in a non-traditional solution. And then, incentivizing adoption of solar and increasing, having targeted efforts to increase participation in our programs that are other types of solutions that we consider. And then also, like I said, any other types of solutions that are more outside the box that involve working with individual customers are also things that we look at. Does that answer your question?
That answers my question. Thank you. That's helpful.
Awesome. So we did get some resources shared by folks in the chat. So thank you so much, Charlie and Katie, for sharing that. Just wanted to let everyone know that is in there, should you want to poke around some of those resources. But not seeing anybody else raise their hands or drop anything into chat. So thank you so much for those answers, Ian, and I'll let you jump back into the community engagement workflow.
I think I discussed this, but did I cover everything on this? So yeah, I mean, basically we collect feedback from these sessions. We record it in our database. We make sure that we're in sync with the CEIP database. As we get these questions, we do a determination if it's best answered by the DSP team or some other group within the company. We document our actions that we take in both our database and the CEIP tracker, and we do a review and make sure that we're identifying trends that could influence our future initiatives. So now we'll kind of review some of the areas that we have collected feedback so far this year from our Washington stakeholders and where we're going to be collecting feedback going forward. So we'll take a moment to review this year's engagement sessions and outline our next steps. So far we've had 4 sessions as part of the CEIP engagement series, and we've also conducted one-on-one meetings with members of our equity advisory group in Washington. So our discussions have covered the evolution of the distribution system and the need to modernize distribution system planning. We've explored insights from similar efforts in Oregon. We've examined non-traditional solutions. We've talked about how we structure our community workshops and addressed ways to measure and enhance community benefits. So additionally, we've discussed the unique needs of our service areas in Oregon and Washington and how we plan to adapt our approach to meet Washington's requirements. So next, we'll be incorporating the feedback that we've collected from these sessions and draft our plan for distribution system plannings in the 2025 CEIP. Next slide, please. So, and then, going forward, our plans to collect feedback are, we'll continue to have these engagement sessions as they occur in the CEIP engagement series next year. We plan to, and then, for our workshops that we'll be starting to host in 2026. This is kind of a high level overview of how that will look in our planning process. So we begin by setting criteria for selecting study areas, considering factors like SCADA coverage, community benefit indicators, last time since that area was studied. And then we analyze load growth and identify preliminary grid needs. And then we organize a workshop to engage with key stakeholders, including community-based organizations, city planners, and other local leaders. So our community workshops that we host are hybrid and open to the public and held locally and announced on the distribution system planning website and through our DSP mailing list, which is dsp@pacificor.com. If you'd like to be added to that list, please email that address and we'll add you to the list. And then following those workshops, we incorporate feedback into a detailed analysis. We identify grid needs that may benefit from non-traditional solutions. If we find those opportunities, we organize a second community workshop to discuss the benefits, risk, and the community alignment to those solutions. And then after finalizing our proposal of projects, if we are pursuing any non-traditional solutions, we do plan to host a final workshop and outline and discuss our next steps with the community. So to wrap up, as mentioned, as we move forward, our next steps are going to be integrating this feedback into that we've received through this engagement series in the 2025 CEIP. And we'll be collaborating with the CEIP team, the DSM team, and all the key stakeholders internally and externally to develop and document that plan. So that concludes my presentation today, and happy to answer any additional questions or comments for any of the content that I've covered today.
Thank you so much, Ian. Gonna give it a second to see if anyone drops a question in or comes off mute. And inevitably, anytime I say next slide is right when somebody does. So if that's the case, that is all right. But yep, not seeing anyone. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide and give everyone about a 10-minute break to see everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a very relaxing 10 minutes, answered a few emails or stretched your legs. But we are now going to shift and dive into the exciting world of demand response. And I see Laura James ready on the screen, ready to jump in. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Laura.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everyone. We have dedicated about an hour of our agenda for today's meeting to discussing demand response. So we'd really like to dig in. Our DR portfolio is still a very new initiative for Pacific Power. In our initial CEP, we proposed launching a portfolio with 5 programs starting completely from scratch. To date, we have 3 of those active in the market. That's the Irrigation Load Control Program, Commercial and Industrial Demand Response, both of which launched in 2023, and our Optimal Time Rewards Program, which is targeted to residential thermostats and water heaters, which launched in February of this year. And we had more in our plan. So in this meeting, we're going to kind of revisit that and walk through where we're at with all of those programs. To start off, I'm going to touch on some aspects of Schedule 106, which is the PacifiCorp Pacific Power tariff that is kind of an umbrella tariff and enables all of the programs in our DR portfolio. There are a couple items that will be relevant today. Then we'll shift into talking about our existing programs, giving you an update on this past year and what we're planning going forward. And following that, we will move into a more exciting section, I think, which is talking about 3 new programs that we are proposing to launch next year. So not 2, but 3. And finally, we will wrap up with a look at our portfolio performance to date and our forecast our forecasts against our CEIP demand response target. As we go through these, you will see we've got a lot of changes happening across this portfolio in all of our programs. That puts us in a pretty dynamic place. So unfortunately, some of the details in these slides have changed since we put them together. In particular, some of the dates have changed when we were hoping to have documentation out to stakeholders or have programs ready to go live. Some of those have slipped by just a week or 2. So I have to ask forgiveness for that, and we will call those out as we go through these. Next slide. So starting with Schedule 106, as I mentioned, Schedule 106 is our umbrella tariff. If you're interested in the tariff language, it is available on our website. The filing from Pacific Power that established this tariff also included outlining the processes that we would use to either introduce new programs under the tariff or make changes to existing programs. The main difference is that for new programs, we will submit a filing to the commission. Prior to doing that, we'll create a draft that will be distributed to stakeholders. I believe we're using our DSM AG, DSM advisory group contact list and our EAG contact list as our main distribution for those documents. We will receive comments back. We'll indicate the deadline for comments so that and we'll get comments back and we'll provide responses to those comments, then submit the filings to the commission for review. That's the process for new programs. Programs will be effective once they are acknowledged by the commission. For existing programs, we have a different process in place. It does not require filing documentation, but we will do the same process to document the proposed changes, the rationale for the changes, share that with stakeholders, get feedback, publish our response to comments or incorporate comments as appropriate. And then we will, once we have a final set of changes, we will post those to our website and they will be effective after 45 days. So this is similar to the process that we use currently for our energy efficiency programs. So hopefully this would be pretty familiar to a lot of you. We're going to talk about a lot of both changes to existing programs and new programs. So I wanted to make sure that was clear in folks' minds as we move forward. Next slide. So I'll get into our existing programs, starting with irrigation load control. The irrigation load control program was launched in 2023. So last year was our really our second season in the field. This program is primarily active during the summer season because it's irrigation. And we saw a lot of positive results. There was considerable growth in the program. We're ramping at a rapid pace, which is what we wanted to see. We also used the resource more this season than we did the year before. We had 11 curtailment events over the summer. And the average capacity per enrolled site, we did see an increase there. We also had a few negatives really from the season. The capacity per device is still below our target of 15 kW. The opt-out rate was much higher than what we would like to see. It was 50%. We were seeing most participants want to sign up for the 20-minute notification group, which is the notification group that had the highest incentive, and that was much higher than we had anticipated. We thought that 20-minute response requirement would be more of a barrier than it has ended up being. We also saw some participants unenroll, and in doing a look back for the year, the program is not on track to be cost effective at the moment. So next slide. So, you know, one of the hallmarks of our DSM programs is that we are constantly looking for opportunities to adaptively manage them. And we have identified some objectives going into 2025. And that is to make sure the program options align with our company grid management needs to make sure that we're really getting value out of these resources. We want to improve the usability for our energy supply management team. That's the team that is actually managing the power on the grid and determining when we need to call an event. We want to make sure that this is a tool that they can easily use and get value from. And we need to improve the cost effectiveness to make sure that this program is sustainable long term. So to do that, we're proposing to streamline the 3 notification options that we had into a single option that gives everyone 4 hours notice. So we had a day ahead group, a 60-minute group, and a 20-minute group. We found the 60 minutes and 20 minutes was really faster than what we needed, and particularly for the 20 minutes, we were sort of paying extra for that, and it isn't really needed. So, and the day ahead resource was also not very useful to us and also not very popular. So we're going to streamline everybody into a 4-hour notice option. We're setting a single incentive to go along with that. That will be equal to what we were offering for the 60-minute option, 30 kW, but we'll also be offering a 50% bonus for not opting out during the season. So that's intended to target that 50% opt-out rate. And it gives everybody in the program the opportunity to earn the same incentive that they had in 2024, but they need to really commit to the program and be providing a reliable resource in order to get that. We'll be paring back the eligible days and hours to the times when we find we really need the resource. That would be 2 to 9 p.m. instead of 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. and limiting the program to just weekdays instead of 7 days a week. So hopefully that makes things a little bit easier for participants as well. And we'll also be introducing a voluntary component. The voluntary events, we're not proposing any limits on our on when we would dispatch those. So anytime for any duration from the start of the season through September 30th. But these events are 100% voluntary. There's no penalty for opting out. It doesn't count against the participants' incentive if they opt out. And we'll have a separate incentive per kWh for these voluntary events. And this is intended to just give us some additional flexibility and opportunity to use this resource outside the predicted usage. You know, for grid flexibility, flexibility is the key, and this is intended to boost the flexibility. Next slide. If anyone has questions on these as I go through them, please jump in. The commercial and industrial demand response program, we saw similar continued growth. We saw similar increase in usage. We have 4 what we call products in this program. The 60-minute and the 20-minute are peak shaving resources that we would use for the traditional demand response peak shaving. We also have a 7-minute product that we use for fast response, short duration grid management needs. It's usually curtailed for about 15 minutes at a time. And we have a real-time product that we use for frequency response. So we saw growth in all 4 of those. We're seeing improved performance in our 60-minute and 20-minute products. But we are also seeing some need to improve for this program as well. We did find that we're using the frequency response product more than we expected, and we see a need to dig in deeper on our enrollment processes because we are not seeing the pace of growth that we had hoped for. So next slide. So we're proposing we have similar objectives for this program in aligning the program with what we're finding are our actual grid management needs, improving usability, and really increasing volume for this product or for this program. So we are going to eliminate the 20-minute product. We really just don't need that 20-minute response time. Our fast response needs require a faster response than that. And for peak shaving, that's just really faster than we need. So we don't want to be paying for that, that extra response, fast response. Again, we'll change the 60-minute product to be what we call a peak shaving product, and it will have a 4-hour minimum notice, so structured similar to irrigation. And we're also proposing to change the caps on how we dispatch our fast response products, the 7-minute and the real time. So currently we have both an hourly curtailment cap for the year and a number of events cap. The number of events was really more restrictive than the hours. And it also, what was I going to say? Well, it was more restrictive than the hours cap. So we're proposing doing away with those and just having one cap that will be easier to track and manage and just reduce the complexity for the program. And since we are using the real-time product more, we're proposing increasing the number of events for the curtailment from 5 hours over the year to 15 hours over the year. And we don't use that in hourly increments. We just do 5-minute curtailments with that product. But we're finding that we use it frequently throughout the year. Next slide. And I apologize that I am moving through these pretty quickly, but I want to save time for our other slides. Our residential demand response program, known as Optimal Time Rewards, has not been sorry, excuse me. We found as we got into the field that the program was not going to provide the capacity that we expected. And the difference was really drastic. The water heaters, which were sort of the backbone of the value from this program, were going to provide about 70% less capacity per unit than we had anticipated. And that really just completely eroded the cost effectiveness of the program. So we expect to suspend this program as of 2020, November 1st. Maybe a few days beyond that, but that's one of the deadlines that might slip a little bit, but we do plan to end this program we are still really focused on the residential sector, and we will be replacing the Optimal Time Rewards program with 3 new programs that are going to target this sector, and we'll talk about those in a minute, including one of them it's called Cool Keeper, will be targeted to the residential cooling market. So we will still be capturing that resource for demand response. Next slide. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about what happened with Optimal Time Rewards. This was a really disappointing outcome, but we did encounter several challenges with this program. As I mentioned, the biggest one and the issue that we really could not find a way to design around was the reduction in capacity. We went back and forth with our program administrator several times to look at different pricing structure, different program design. They really tried to work with us, but we just couldn't find a way to make it work. There were some other lessons learned from this program. We initially were using a Wi-Fi based communication device for controlling water heaters. We found that with the that presented the requirement to have people sign that device up with their Wi-Fi was really a barrier that we were having trouble getting past, even for those residents that had Wi-Fi. And we found a higher percentage of residents that did not have Wi-Fi than we expected. So that is something that we'll carry forward into other program design. We would prefer a cellular communication or some other form of communication over Wi-Fi. As I mentioned, the program is not cost effective. We still see some value in both water heaters and thermostats as DR resources. Water heaters in particular, they're available year round. There's really minimal impact on the participating household, and they can respond very, very quickly. So if the economics change, we would revisit these in the future. Next slide. Timeline. I really wanted to give a concrete timeline for when we would be circulating draft documents to stakeholders. Unfortunately, I do not think that we will make these dates. So I can say that we expect to circulate program documents in the first couple of weeks of November. We plan to provide at least 2 weeks, preferably 3 to 4 weeks for review and comment. And we'll need a couple weeks once we get comments back, but then we will be posting our responses and final changes, and of course, observing 45 days for those program changes. So that would be the irrigation and the C&I commercial and industrial program. And this is, again, particular just to program changes. The new programs that we're about to talk about will have a slightly different process and a different schedule. Next slide. And with that, we will move into new programs. So I will hand it off to Ryan Harvey.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. My name is Ryan Harvey. I am a Customer Solutions Program Manager at Pack Power. I believe I'm a new face to this group, so that's very exciting. I'm the point person in charge of filing for this battery demand response program that I'll be speaking about. And I also have Sean Grant in my corner. He is the Director of Customer Solutions and also someone who has overseen a very similar demand response program in some of our other states for several years. Okay, so I have only about 5 minutes. This is what I'd like to cover with you, an overview, a little bit of detail, and then some next steps. So Tag, let's move us along. Okay, thank you. So I guess in a description, using layperson's terms, this battery specific demand response program is as follows. If a customer is interested in purchasing a battery storage system, likely that system would be paired with solar panels, then they will soon be able to sign up to participate in this program and receive compensation for essentially allowing the utility to utilize some of that stored electricity from time to time to address short-term strains and needs of the grid. And I'll cover those incentives, that compensation, in a subsequent slide. So there are a few different types of issues that can potentially be addressed with the dispatch of these batteries as a large group simultaneously. But I would say generally, what the customer would experience is the tapping of their battery for likely less than 5 minutes of time. So I guess more accurately, what the customer would experience is it's not much of anything at all, since that's generally really only a few percentage points of the battery's storage capacity. So on the next slide, we call out some of the benefits to both the grid and then also to the batteries that would be participating in this program. So these details are for all of those battery storage nerds out there, I suppose. And I'm not planning on going over each of these bullet points, but they're here for your reference. I would say, however, that the batteries are dispatched using a system that was developed specifically for our own internal energy management team, and it's able to use these participating batteries with the fastest response times in a way that really maximizes grid benefits. So this is really the best of the best as far as battery demand response is concerned. The next slide lays out our proposed incentive structure. So hopefully I can speak to this in a way that makes sense to folks. Essentially, we provide a large upfront incentive to the customer upon enrollment in the program. And so you can see that that's the top bar, $150 per kilowatt per year, with an expectation of 4 years of initial, at least outset participation. And then there are additional incentives that are provided annually for as long as the customer chooses to remain in the program, which is of course something that we would like to see. So the big enrollment incentive at the outset covers years 1 through 4, all at the very beginning. But there is, as you can see, $15 per kilowatt that's provided to customers in the second, third, and fourth years, and then that increases a little bit, because of our hopes of customers continuing to participate in the program. And so this third, I know that the text is quite small, but the third box here shows what I think would be a very common outcome of the program, as 5 kilowatts is a fairly typical size for a residential sized battery. So if you were to purchase a 5 kilowatt battery at $150 per kilowatt for those 4 years, your initial incentive would be $3,000, as you can see. And then in years 2 through 4, you would get an extra $75, and then that would go up further down the timeline to $250 per year once we move forward. Maybe I'll stop there for any quick questions you may have.
I'm monitoring it for you, Ryan, and I don't see anything. Oh, like I said, always speak a second too soon. Paul, would like to hear from you. What do you have for the DR team and Ryan?
Yeah, maybe I just have a couple of quick ones. I wonder if there are any geographic or technological limitations to this program right now. Did I say geologic? I meant geographic. Sorry. And then also wondering if this is going to be extended to maybe folks who can't afford the upfront cost of installing the batteries in their homes, if there's a portion of this program that's directed towards named communities, for example.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for those questions. So I think you did say geographic initially. You know, there are no limitations as I understand them in the geographic sense. You know, I did hint at the system with which we or by which we dispatch or will dispatch these batteries, and because we are looking to see real time benefits to the grid, that there is an expectation for the communications protocols and the standards that that we set within this program, so that'll allow for any battery to become eligible as long as they meet that criteria. So no geographic concerns, but there is currently an eligible battery list, which outlines at least today the list of batteries that are capable of participating at at the speed and communications that are required for the types of dispatch that we're looking for within the program. And then I think to address the second one that you asked, this bottom box, outlines, the potential for us to visit the opportunity to look at alternative models, which, to my understanding, and perhaps Sean can speak to this with more detail, I don't believe this is something that we have moved forward with in our other participating states to date, but it's certainly something that remains on the table as an option for our different types of customers.
Yeah, and Ryan, I did see Sean come off mute. So Sean, not sure if you wanted to add anything to this conversation.
No, I think Ryan adequately described it. The only geographic location would have to be grid tied, and you'd have to have an internet connection. So if that wasn't obvious, that's important. And yeah, the future lease option, again, we just have it noted there that it could be an option. Currently, it's not part of the proposal and not what we're doing in other states. So I think Ryan, described that accurately.
Thanks, Sean. All right, and then finally, because we have a lot of other stuff to cover, I wanted to spotlight what we're imagining would be the estimated costs for the program in the first few years of its existence within the state of Washington, as well as the estimated participation rates. And these are based again on our experience in other regions of our service area, obviously, prorated with consideration for, the customer base that we have in our Washington specific service area. And then the final slide that I have is really just outlining next steps. We're in the midst, as we speak today, of a window provided for the reception of stakeholder comments. And so if you haven't, but would like to see the draft of our filing, I can happily provide that to you. And I think after I get done talking, I'll put an email in the chat for folks to use in order to do that. We're hoping to file on the 15th of November, which is just a few weeks from now. And then we'll be getting our ducks in a row internally so that we can kick this off as soon as we can in January of 2025, and very excited about the opportunity. Well, thank you all. If there aren't any other questions, I believe I'm passing the baton to Chris at this point.
You are spot on. We'll invite Chris to the virtual stage and then just remind everyone else that we do have the DR and broader subject matter expert team on the line should something pop into your mind as we go throughout the remainder of the presentation. Thank you so much, Ryan. Chris, are you out there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. It doesn't look like my video is going to cooperate with me.
You know, of the two, the sound is far more important.
That's good. I agree with you. So as Laura sort of had talked about, one of the programs we're looking at expanding to Washington service territory is our Cool Keeper program. It's been existing for longer than a decade in our Utah Wasatch Front. Currently have 119,000 customers, air conditioners enrolled in the program. And we have, it's, you know, quite a lot, about a power plant between 100 to 320 megawatts of peak load reduction for peak load and frequency control. I'm going to sort of go fast over these slides. If you have some details or questions later, please ask them. Here's a picture of the actual load control, we call load control response device that actually goes on to the AC or heat pumps. Most heat pumps too are included. This is not for window units or evaporative cooling. This is for the AC load. And it targets residential air conditioners and utilizes real-time dispatch. We're looking at using a cellular device for those areas in our Washington service territory. Next slide, please. So the parameters for a dispatch, during May 1 through September 30th is sort of our peak load for times that we have the operation, and we're able to dispatch billable hours there. And then the Monday through Friday for the standard, excluding holidays. Emergency dispatches are anytime. And the events will be limited to 4 hours per day, sort of some standards. Next slide, hopefully get to this next one. This is the one. Are we able to play this, Morgan? This is really helpful little video of, and I'll give you a context of visual of how the program works.
What's the coolest thing about cooling season? Getting a $30 credit on your electric bill every summer is easy with Cool Keeper. The Cool Keeper device is installed near your central air conditioner unit outside. The Cool Keeper device is only activated on select summer days, May through September. When activated, your air conditioner will still operate, but just about half as much. Or the air conditioner will cycle off for 30 minutes or less while your fan continues to circulate air throughout your home. Along with 92,000 other customers in the Cool Keeper program, your participation benefits the environment and keeps costs down for all Utahns. That's $30 off your bill every year. For more information or to sign up for the Cool Keeper program, visit rockymountainpower.net/coolkeeper or call us at 1-800-357-9214.
Obviously, thank you for, obviously this was for the Rocky Mountain Power, for the Wasatch Front, but that would be, if we use something like that, that would be tailored to our specific geographic location. Here on this, everything's interconnected. You can see the diagrams there, but we use Franklin Energy. They do our field operations maintenance and installations, and then marketing and data operations of the program. And we use Eaton they manufacture those Coolkeeper pencil-sized load control devices in the middle there that we use. And then they also have the backbone of the hosted system and the dispatch and connect to our controls for the dispatch. Next slide, please. And then next steps, stakeholder obviously review. We're still working on, when obviously we have a lot going on, as Ryan said, Ryan's out there with the batteries, and we're looking at dates for filing this program, and anticipate an early kickoff in early 2025. And that's about it from me. I mean, if there's any questions from anybody in the group, be glad to take them.
Not seeing any right now, Chris, but I will keep my eye on it. And again, just encourage folks to raise their hand, drop it in chat, or wait till the end of the demand response presentation in its entirety if you feel that's best. The SMEs will be on the line until the end, so they remain a resource for you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sierra, I see come off mute and so welcome to the virtual stage. You're up, excited to learn about what you're about to share.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Great.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm Sierra Gentry. I'm a program manager at PacifiCorp, and I'm talking to you today about the electric vehicle demand response program that we are proposing at this time. So to give a little bit of context, electric vehicles are pretty unique when it comes to demand response for a variety of reasons, but the more obvious one is just they're mobile. So with other demand response programs, we send signals to devices that are at stationary locations. They're a little bit more predictable. Electric vehicles obviously are not. They're moving around. People charge their vehicles at different spots during different times of the day, and depending on where they are in the week, what their commute is, things like that. And on top of that, we also have the added difficulty of if we have a demand response program that is too invasive with electric vehicles, it prevents people from being able to adequately charge their vehicle. We don't want them to feel stranded. We don't want them to feel like we are kind of like overstepping our bounds as a utility by using an asset that is something that they are using possibly daily and using for long durations of time. So when we were designing this program, we really wanted it to have a customer first focus, knowing that, again, if it's too invasive or if it's seemingly too invasive or overstepping, customers would not want to enroll. But we also wanted to make a program that was beneficial to us as a utility, because we need to have those mutually beneficial program designs in order for us to help keep costs down and provide added benefits by using these resources. So that's where the idea of leveraging electric vehicles as a frequency demand response resource came from. With this program, we intend on pausing vehicle charging for only up to 5 minutes at a time for frequency demand response events. And we believe that 5 minutes should be pretty minimally impactful for a customer. Ideally, with many DR programs as well, it shouldn't even register for them. And we hope that customers would not even know an event occurred, or a pause charging event, I should say, occurred until after they resume charging. Another unique thing about this program is that the signals will actually be sent directly to the vehicle rather than the charger. And the reason that's really critical is because, again, with the mobility of vehicles, someone might be charging their vehicle primarily at home, but they might be doing workplace charging, or they might be at a fast charger at any time of the day. So being able to target the vehicle itself rather than simply a stationary charger gives us more opportunities and more touch points with customers, and allows us to have a larger impact with those who are enrolled in the program. With this solution, only the vehicles that are charging within Pacific Power's territory will receive the dispatch signal. So if someone happens to be maybe on a road trip or outside of our territory during a demand response event, they simply would not receive the pause charging signal. Additionally, a customer can always opt out of an event. The next slide that we'll go to, not yet, but the next slide will talk a little bit more about the incentives. But we do want to make sure that customers are always in control of their charging, and that if a 5-minute pause event is too detrimental to them, then they can always just proceed onward, either at no penalty or slight penalty. And any type of an eligible electric vehicle can enroll, regardless of if it is residential or non-residential for usage. This is primarily focused on residential electric vehicles. However, if a vehicle is included on the eligible list, meaning that if the demand response platform can dispatch to that vehicle, they can enroll in the program. And I did see a question already come up.
Yes, Sierra, we did have a question come in from Jacqueline Simmons asking, does this mean a customer must approve the company to get geolocation data of that EV?
That is correct. So I don't have that level of detail in these slides, but there is a set of information or permissions, I should say, that the enrolling customers do have to grant in order to enroll in the program, which includes location of the vehicle, the ability to pause and resume charging of the vehicle, receiving information like the VIN, make, model of the vehicle. Some of those we're not actually going to be leveraging, but it just required of the dispatch system. But that is correct that customers will have to grant us those permissions. And that is something that we want to make sure we are addressing appropriately with customers, that they know what level of data they're giving us and what we are doing with that data. And at this time, we are only using the location data for dispatching and verifying that they are within our territory, because it's not appropriate for us to do any managed charging if the vehicle is charging outside of our jurisdiction.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Jacqueline, hoping that answered your questions. If you want to give me a thumbs up, otherwise happy to expand upon it. Smooth sailing. Thank you, Sierra.
All right, so I think with that, I want to go on to the next slide, talking a little bit about our proposed incentives. So what we are proposing is up to $100 for the first year of enrollment. So partially to kind of give them a larger incentive to encourage them to enroll, and then at $50 for each following year. For that $100 for the first year, we could do a like $50 sign-on bonus plus 100 or plus 50 for the remainder of the year. It will just kind of depend on some of our final decisions and what type of feedback we get from our stakeholders as well. Additionally, customers can receive 2 penalty-free opt-outs, meaning that if they receive a pause charging signal that they can't participate in, up to 2 times they can opt out and not participate in those with no penalty to their incentive. However, each corresponding opt-out would be a $10 reduction in their final incentive up until they are no longer receiving an incentive. And I do want to be clear that we will not be charging customers. So if, let's just say for that first year, they opt out 10 times, their 11th opt-out will not cost them any money. They just will not be receiving an incentive for that year. So before I go on, I want to see if there are any questions here as well, or if anything else I've been talking about. And I think if not, I can go to the next slide, then questions will come up. So I don't want to go too much into the details here, but this is just showing some initial projected costs for the program. We are still working with our vendor to see what the final cost will be for this particular program. Without going into the details, there are some discussions with having this expansion both in Washington and Oregon, and there will be some corresponding costs with how the platform works and how the actual final program is implemented. But these are the preliminary costs that we see along with the forecasted enrollment. For context, there are approximately 1,200 electric vehicles registered in our territory within the Washington state. I am looking to see if we can update that number, but that's approximately where we stand. So we're not expecting to see large enrollments initially, but we are hopeful that over the years we will continue to see enrollment with customers. We also will be targeting customers based on who has previously enrolled in an electric vehicle program of ours, primarily like time of use or incentive programs for charger rebates. So we do have some touch points with customers that are known to have electric vehicles. We'll be reaching out to them as well as working with our vendor to see if they can do additional forecasting for locations that they believe customers have electric vehicles, so that we're using our resources wisely to target those who will actually benefit or who can enroll in this program. And then I want to go to the next slide. This is showing a summary of the eligible electric vehicle makes that can participate. Of course, there's always going to be caveats, so not every model can participate and not every year of vehicle. So specifically, some of the older generations of EVs, unfortunately, have difficulties participating in programs like this just due to either software issues or they may not have the capabilities of communicating with the vendor platform that we are working with. And that's pretty typical with technology like this, so that's really not surprising. But we do see that there are a large set of makes that you can see here, and many of them are the popular ones that we see in the market as well. And the reason that this is a really, again, unique program targeting the vehicle is that we don't need to worry about what type of electric vehicle charger someone has or where they're charging, or as long as we can communicate with that vehicle and as long as that vehicle is eligible, they can enroll and they'll be able to receive those signals. So we believe that this opens the door for more customers to be able to participate, and it reduces the likelihood of someone not being able to participate because they simply do not have an eligible device. All right, and the last what I have here is going through the next steps. So on my action items is to finalize the cost estimates that we have from our vendor and to get some more updated ideas for how many customers we expect will be enrolling. After that, we will do a more thorough stakeholder review to make sure that all stakeholders involved have an understanding of what the program entails. We can get additional questions that were not addressed in this conversation. And our intention is to file in the November-December timeframe. In parallel to that, we'll be discussing the launch plan with our vendor, making sure we have the communication plan out, making sure that all the technology side items are ready to go for the official launch date. And we intend on, I would say, early next year. So January might be a little fast, but we do intend on having this program launch within the first quarter of next year, assuming that all items go according to plan, which I believe they will. So we are very excited for this program. We know there may be a lot of questions with this, especially because electric vehicles are pretty unique for demand response, especially in this context. So I'm looking forward to addressing questions that you have. And I also, we can always share some lessons learned that we had applying this program in the Rocky Mountain Power territory as well. So with that, I want to see again if there are other questions. And if not, we can go over to Laura to wrap things up here.
Still not seeing anything. So why don't we hand it over to you, Laura, to wrap up this section? Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thanks, Sierra. So to wrap up our section on demand response, I wanted to take a look at our portfolio. The chart on the left here really tells the story. We started, we've been ramping up quickly since 2023, and we expect to have 16 megawatts in our portfolio by the end of 2025. Unfortunately, that is significantly below our CEIP target of 37.4 megawatts. This is the result of setting a target at the outset of launching programs. We've been learning a lot about what is feasible, what types of programs work, what programs can actually deliver. And we are adapting as quickly as we can and really committed internally to growing our demand response portfolio in Washington. I think the three little bars at the top of that 2025 year-end column kind of speak to that. Those are the three brand new programs that we've just been talking about. The reason that the capacity forecast is so low for those programs is just that they'll be really brand new by the end of 2025. But we expect all of them to grow. They have significant capacity within the state and are addressing growing markets within the state. And so while we don't think we'll meet the 2025 CEIP target, we are optimistic about the future of our DR portfolio. I will pause there. Any comments or questions on this slide?
Yeah, I see Paul, you have your hand up. I invite you to come off mute.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do you forecast further than that 2025 year? And is there a graph of that? I may have missed it. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't have a graph of that in this presentation. We do forecast beyond that, although at the moment our formal forecasts are only for our existing programs, and those go through the middle of 2026. I think we're still working out the forecast for our new programs, and even as we have a forecast for them, based on our experience to date, we'll need to be continually monitoring and updating those forecasts as we get out into the field and learn more about how those programs perform.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Not seeing any, but this is kind of the last slide before we move to IRP. So I want to give it just an extra second. And again, not to say you can't have questions after the fact, but just to make sure we hear everything, why don't we give it just another second or two to see if anyone raises their hand or drops something into the chat. Okay. Dare I say, next slide, and a big thank you to the demand response team for going over all of that information. Randy, I see you out there in virtual land. Welcome to the engagement space, and excited to hear what you have for us today.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Coming in wonderfully.
Wonderful. All right, let's go ahead, and start on this slide. So I'm Randy Baker, PacifiCorp's Director of Resource Planning. Many of you may have heard some of this material before in other meetings or even other venues. My intention today is to add some detail around resource portfolio selections in the upcoming 2025 Integrated Resource Plan and the aligned clean energy implementation planning. And this will include some review, but also describe some of the updated processes for the 2025 IRP, and also some currently anticipated IRP and clean energy implementation planning studies. And those are broadly discussed on this initial slide. However, let me back up a step quickly just to orient us to say that traditionally, the Integrated Resource Plan provides an optimized view of long-term planning that covers a 20-year horizon. It will actually cover, if I remember right, a 21-year horizon to take us out through 2045 to meet requirements. But essentially, a very similar planning horizon. The focus of the long-term plan has been to evaluate the least cost, least risk plan for our entire 6-state service territory. And the plan's ultimate expression is a combination of coordinated resources that we refer to as the preferred portfolio. So just quickly, for example, let's say that the preferred portfolio of resources includes 500 megawatts of new wind energy and 500 megawatts of new solar energy added to the system at the best locations and in the most effective years. It is the integrated resource planning modeling that selects those resources and determines when, where, how much, and what type of resources to add, given our forecasts of energy need and energy prices across the long-term future. PacifiCorp's Clean Energy Implementation Plan for Washington uses these same tools, but focuses more directly on meeting Washington's planning needs. In our first CEIP portfolio for Washington, our approach was to first establish the resource plan for the entire system, and then to evaluate additional resources that would need to be layered on to meet Washington's CETA standards and other legislated goals. At the time, PacifiCorp saw this approach as making sense because the overall direction of the 6-state system and Washington CEIP objectives aligned very closely. There was a possibility going into those earlier studies that no additional resources would be needed for Washington, depending on the system level outcomes for all states. And indeed, this was very nearly the case in our earlier outcomes. This strategy has evolved, however, and instead of layering on resources to the preferred portfolio to meet Washington's needs, our approach is now to determine the optimal portfolio for each state and then to integrate the results into a final preferred portfolio for everyone. And I'll talk about that a bit more on the next couple of slides, but staying here for just a moment, note that in this approach, each initial portfolio is optimal for the state or states to which it applies. And when the portfolios are integrated, these are the initial portfolios, we integrate them into the final preferred portfolio for everyone. And the resources that were selected by multiple states are shared by those states. So there is an assumption built into the plan that says that the Washington run did not pick this resource, therefore Washington does not participate in this resource. And if you have a situation where multiple states participate in a resource, then that resource gets shared out. And as you can see on the slide, Washington has particular constraints and requirements that differ from the other states. These requirements and constraints are taken into account endogenously in the initial modeling, where endogenous simply means that these initial portfolios are made by the model and not based on any external or subjective determinations. Washington's primary requirements are embodied in the Clean Energy Implementation Plan, including CETA standards compliance, the use of the social cost of greenhouse gases as a cost driver, and requirements for renewable portfolio standards. Next slide, please. So for the 2025 IRP, starting at the left of the diagram, there are fundamental model setups describing what we've called price policy scenarios. Each portfolio of resources, remember that's a coordinated assignment of resources made by the model, each portfolio will be evaluated for cost and risk amongst 3 natural gas price scenarios, which is low, medium, and high, and 3 carbon dioxide CO2 price scenarios, which are 0 CO2, regulatory mandate, and high. And I'll talk a little bit more about those. But an additional emissions cost scenario evaluates performance assuming a price signal aligned to the social cost of greenhouse gases. And that's the one that is most relevant for Washington and the selection of Washington resources. So taken together in different combinations between gas prices and CO2 price driver assumptions, we end up with 5 distinct price policy scenarios as labeled in the bubbles at the left. Those are the ones in the multiple colors. So each of the price policy scenarios will be used for a number of cases or studies to evaluate portfolios and portfolio dispatch under a wide range of conditions. In particular, this treatment gives some insight as to how robust a portfolio of resources might be under differing future conditions. And that may inform final selection of the preferred portfolio. If you have a robust portfolio that performs well under a broad range of conditions, maybe it's a little more expensive, but working toward an unknown future, it might be better to hedge that risk and do something that's a little more expensive to get better reliance against an unknown future. So among the cases that will be run under various price policy scenarios, we have base assumptions that go into the model. These are assumptions that represent the company's expected set of requirements and constraints and its expected forecasts. And you can see a sampling of those in that large gray center bubble under Plexos. Those are examples of the key Plexos modeling inputs. There are alternative assumptions, alternative data inputs, such as variants that assume no new gas sources are allowed or no climate change considerations are made. And those are sensitivities and variants that we use to evaluate what different futures might look like. Each model run produces a set of outputs, including the portfolio itself. Moving over to that gray bubble on the right, those outputs include possible retirements of existing resources, the conversion of coal-fueled to gas-fueled resources, carbon capture and sequestration technology, demand-side resources, energy efficiency selections, supply-side proxy resource selections. There's just a host of things that the model is busy optimizing when we run it. Also included are endogenously selected transmission options, market purchases and sales, emissions output, that is an outgrowth of the dispatch, reliability metrics, and of course, the cost of each portfolio's selection of resources. Each study that we perform includes the process of integrating short-term modeling results back into our long-term modeling inputs through the use of granularity and reliability adjustments. And if you've been with us for a while or in some of our integrated resource planning public input meetings, you're probably very familiar with this topic. But the idea is that Plexos, mentioned on this slide, is a suite of modeling tools, and it actually includes several distinct models, and they each focus on some elements that are important to modeling an optimal portfolio. And by doing so, they have less focus on other elements of what you need to model a portfolio. So the long-term model just runs for 20 years and has a certain granularity of bucketing that it does. It doesn't evaluate every individual hour, and it can't because there's not time to do it in a 20-year model. The short-term model is an hourly model, but it has a very different function. It's optimizing dispatch. It's involved in the assessment of risk determinations. The point being that the short-term model is the most granular. It has the most microscopic view of what's actually going on in the system. So the LT model produces a portfolio. The short-term model, ST model, evaluates that portfolio and tells us such things as, on an hourly basis, are there shortfalls? Do we actually drop load somewhere? Is the dispatch doing something crazy? Are the emissions significantly different from what happened in the long-term model with its less granular view? And the iterative approach that's indicated by those arrows circling between those two gray bubbles on the screen, those arrows indicate the iterative nature of Plexos modeling. So you run it, you come up with an outcome, you test it in the short-term model, you feed information about that back to the long-term model, and you do it again. And with each iteration, you get some variations that are gradually pointing you toward the best possible outcome. So regarding the outputs in the gray box at the right, we are committed in the 2025 IRP and upcoming CEIP to building on the reporting improvements and transparency that we achieved in the 2021 IRP two-year progress report and also the recent 2023 IRP update. Next slide, please. So as just discussed, the same tools and processes that serve the integrated resource plan also serve modeling for the clean energy implementation plan. And this slide illustrates a little bit more of how initial portfolios are developed and integrated. And so that's the focus here, is really thoughts on integration. Moving from left to right, you can see that we have 3 initial portfolio runs relevant to all of our states, and Oregon has its own run, Washington has its own run, and then California, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming collectively have their own run. Note that Washington, again, requires the social cost of greenhouse gas cost drivers for CO2. That is noted as SC in this flow chart. So if you look to the second column where it says price policy, we will be assessing initial portfolios under various price policy scenarios, but the key scenarios are anticipated to be the MN, that is a medium natural gas price assumption with a no additional CO2 costs beyond what is currently forecasted to be in evidence in policy for the 2025 IRP. Still got many months to go. There could be some adjustments to that, but that's currently the plan. Washington's resources are all selected under the social cost greenhouse gas assumption. We run those 3 initial models through the long-term model. That is the capacity expansion model that actually performs the resource selections. Then we begin those iterations through the short-term model, testing those portfolios and closing in on what the ideal portfolio is under each of those 3 scenarios. And then we perform the integration. Each state is going to participate in resources that were chosen as optimal for their state, assuming their requirements and drivers. We still anticipate that a great many of the resources that are selected will be shared amongst all the states, because there's just a lot of resources that are just a good idea. But we will see variances and additional selections that come in for Washington. That we anticipate that. And again, those will be based on Washington's optimal selections. We bring all of those resources together into one package, and that becomes the final preferred portfolio.
Randy, I almost called you Ryan. Apologies. We do have a hand up. So Charlie, wondering if you have a question for our IRP guru, Randy Baker.
Hey, this is Charlie. Sorry, did you call on me? I didn't think that I raised my hand.
It appears that you are in the meeting twice, and one of you has their hand up. But
okay.
I'm sorry. This is Rose Monahan with Sierra Club. It does look like my name is listed as Charlie Thompson. I didn't notice that when I signed on. I do want to flag that when I clicked on the link for this meeting through Pacific Corpus website, it was a broken link. And so I asked Charlie if she had the link. And so that's probably what happened. But I actually did have a question. And that is going back to what Randy was just talking about, that the MN price policy scenario is anticipated to be the main scenario. And so I guess I want to clarify, does that mean that is the scenario that PacifiCorp is anticipating that it would pick its preferred portfolio from? And this is more of just commentary, but that price policy scenario, as I understand it, it's a 0 CO2 price, and it also does not incorporate current federal regulations. And so that portfolio would impact the pool of resources that might be selected by other states that Washington would also want to select. And so it sort of has this feedback loop where it's impacting Washington's final portfolio. And so I guess I'm just looking for more discussion or
yeah,
to understand, like, why is that the portfolio that you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. And the short story, we covered this fairly extensively in the public input meeting series, but the crux of it is that I'm trying not to cast back too far or go into too much detail for our purposes here today, but there has been a consistent trajectory toward additional federal and state legislation. And that is what the CO2 proxy price has been there to represent, was that continuing trajectory. The MN is not no CO2 price driver. It's no CO2 price driver beyond what is forecasted or existing. And that's an important distinction. So, we've had a lot of federal and state activity over the last couple of years. Those will all be incorporated to the extent that our forecast says these are realistic, that these are going to happen or have happened. And so really, if you've got an MM with a medium proxy CO2 assumption for the future, and that future has manifested, it gets rolled into the MN, which assumes those things that have happened or are, forecasted to be realistic. So there was not as much discussion about this when we presented it in the public input meeting series as I anticipated, because this is exactly the question that we were attempting to address. But that's what's going on. The MR is a new price policy scenario that is directly tied to this, and the MR makes just one or two different assumptions from the MN. They are overwhelmingly the same, except for, I believe, the inclusion of 111D, which is currently being heavily challenged. And so we're going to run scenarios under all those cases and present them to our stakeholders in the draft and have discussions about it. But yeah, that's where we're currently headed, is that the MN is now inclusive of everything that we believe is most likely to happen. I hope that helps.
That does help. I guess I would just follow up that in the MN of what is most likely to happen, the 111D regulation did happen, right? And I totally understand that it will go through litigation. But I guess I want to throw out that, and I know Sierra Club has raised this before, and perhaps when we see the portfolios, there will be further discussion on what is the portfolio that should be chosen as preferred that balances cost and risk, but ignoring the 111D regulation as a default, or like that feels problematic and risky for customers.
I agree, and that's precisely why we're not ignoring it. We're running studies on it, and we'll discuss those and figure out how to treat them.
Okay, thanks.
And I think that takes me to the next slide if there aren't any other immediate questions.
Not seeing any right now, so why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide?
Okay, so this slide's focusing on Washington-specific sensitivities, and the 2025 IRP is going to include initial studies that cover state-specific policies and constraints that will be integrated into the unified preferred portfolio. It will include variant studies eligible to be the preferred portfolio, which, for example, includes a no natrium demonstration nuclear project, a no new technology study that assumes that nuclear and advanced non-emitting peaking technologies are not available. There will be a few counterfactuals, such as offshore wind. Counterfactual means that if offshore wind is selected in the initial model runs, then we will deselect it and run a comparison case. And vice versa. If it's not selected, then we will add it and run a comparison case. So either way, you've got bookends there. A study to retire all coal by a certain year, a no new natural gas study. So those are variants that we do not anticipate would be least cost, least risk compared to the base assumptions, but it's possible. And if we saw that in the outcomes, then we would do a lot of evaluation and testing of that to see what's happening. Regardless, we run those variants and evaluate them, if for no other reason than to demonstrate that the model did the right thing by making a different choice. And then the third item here for the 2025 IRP will include sensitivities that require fundamentally different inputs for informational purposes. Bookend studies for load, distributed generation, a federal opportunities option that assumes an optimistically high rate of adoption of federal credits and opportunities. And all of those will be informative with regard to the preferred portfolio and PacifiCorp planning. Some of the variants and sensitivities provide alternative path analysis. So if we get a year or two down the road and the world looks different, perhaps we will have already run a study that shows what we should be doing in that different world. And then moving down to the second major bullet, the 2025 CEIP will include additional Washington studies for Washington compliance. So under A, that's the basic CETA compliance initial and integrated portfolios. So we should end up with a compliant preferred portfolio is really the point there. And under B, a lowest reasonable cost case. And that is a required case that we run for Washington, which helps to establish the cost and risk differential. In other words, if CETA were not a factor, what would we have done? And what would the cost and risks of that case be? And then under C, a climate change counterfactual, there's a requirement in Washington to run a climate change sensitivity. However, because PacifiCorp already includes climate change in its base assumptions, we take a slightly different tact of running a counterfactual where we remove climate change factors and we evaluate what that case looks like. And then there's also a maximum customer benefits case, and that I believe it's WAC 48100 62010C, instructing utilities to model the maximum amount of customer benefits as described in the RCW prior to balancing against other goals. And so in that case, we direct the model to focus on adding distributed generation, demand response, and energy efficiency, as well as avoiding high voltage transmission upgrades in PacifiCorp's Yakima and Walla Walla areas to minimize burdens and maximize benefits to Washington customers. So it's actually a fairly complicated case, but a good one for establishing, what you get for the additional cost of maximizing the customer's non-economic benefits. And I think that's really what that case focuses on. I think that takes me to the next slide. So this is revisiting our 2025 IRP planning schedule, tracking our progress across all of the different broad stages of developing an integrated resource plan. You'll see the yellow star that's in the blue section, a little bit toward the right. That's roughly where we are currently. We've committed data and modeling updates. We've been spending last many weeks taking the model through a shakedown cruise, I like to call it, to work out any bugs or kinks and identify any errors in our data entry, anything that's not working. And we are moving into the actual portfolio development and analytics. And that is going to take us a couple of months to achieve. There's a lot of work. Most of the work for the IRP team happens during that time. In parallel, the IRP draft document is being drafted. And we've got that next major bubble labeled as month 13, present and discuss draft preferred portfolio. And then finally to file the IRP. And I'll talk about the scheduling of those items on my last slide. Let's go ahead and move to that. So, our next major milestones for external discussion and evaluation and feedback. January 1, 2025 is our due date for the distribution of the 2025 draft IRP. Now, actually, it's much more likely to be December 31st because we won't be distributing it on the holiday. So the requirement is by January 1. It'll actually be a day or two ahead of that. And then we have 2 public input meetings for the IRP scheduled to discuss the draft. At least I expect that will primarily be the subject at hand. One is scheduled for January 22nd, 23rd of next year, and one is scheduled for February 26th and 27th of next year. And then a little more than a month following that second upcoming public input meeting will be the filing of the 2025 IRP itself. And that is it. That's what we're planning to do, and that's the schedule we're planning to do it on. Do we have any questions or comments?
Not seeing any right now, Randy. But we'll give it a second, and I suppose a little bit of a spoiler alert. We are going to public comment right after this as well. So feel free to use that time should you need an extra second to think about what you want to ask Randy here. Not seeing any right now. So thank you so much, Randy. We really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you.
Awesome. So why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide and open the floor up for public comment. This is a public meeting space, so we want to hold space for any additional comment, either from what was presented today or just in general. Okie dokie. Not seeing anybody raise their hand or drop into the chat. Dare I say next slide and invite Rohini back to talk about our next steps.
Hi, I'm back. Okay, so we are coming up to the end of 2024. I can't believe it is nearly November. And I'm sure for most of us, the end of the year is pretty hectic. Between holidays and people traveling, we tend to definitely slow down at the end of the year, particularly in our engagement space. So I do want to call out that we do have an upcoming Washington Equity Advisory Group meeting that will be held December 12th, 2024 from 1 to 4 p.m. And that meeting info is linked here. This is the last CEIP engagement series of 2024. So the next time we see you will be in 2025, and we'll be really kicking off officially our 2025 planning cycle. In the meantime, you can always stay up to date by visiting our website. All of that great info is linked here. Like I said earlier today, our feedback tracker is updated. So if you want to go take a look through high-level summaries of all of the engagement we've gotten in the last year, it's a great resource. And in the meantime, I don't expect you will hear from the team too much through the end of the year. We'll probably reach out in January to kind of set the stage for upcoming meetings and timelines. But I do hope folks have some time to reflect on the content today. And as we've said a couple times, we really are looking for feedback. We really do appreciate all the feedback we got today. And, please feel free to reach out, email us at ceip@pacificcorp.com. You're also welcome to reach out to my personal email address if you've got that. Whatever works, whatever's comfortable. We are going into pretty heavy internal planning sessions, so excited to look ahead towards our next IRP and CEIP and all of the really great stuff that's going into that. We are definitely thinking through our CBIs. So if folks have feedback, things they've thought about and don't feel have been reflected in that area, please let us know. We are refreshing our CBIs, taking a hard look at the data we've got for the last couple of years. So lots of really great stuff going on. Did I get all of the closing out stuff, Morgan?
You did. You did.
Okay. Then with that, I just thank everyone who is here today. I appreciate all of the great feedback, comments, questions. Thank you to our internal team, our SMEs, and thank you to eSource for hosting as always. And with that, I will call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.